Liberal MPs are already trying to blame these Western wildfires on climate change, a very woke idea. And as these residents desperately try to defend their properties from these raging fires, they are being prevented by the local bureaucracy and their woke policies. Is that something that the Conservative Party of Canada is going to talk about? Of course not. They haven't even stood up for Josh Alexander, a Catholic high school student who's been arrested for saying that there's only two genders. His parents are now facing consequences for simply having this basic conservative Christian belief. The Conservative Party of Canada and Pierre Poilievre say that they're fighting the woke, but they have not stood up for the people who are taking the slings and arrows here in Canada to actually fight the woke. Mark Friesen joins me tonight to talk about this further, and the conversation starts now.
I promise you, I will not let you down.
The trucks parked outside illegally should move.
Canada's Conservatives will meet our Paris climate commitment.
Enough with the woke. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I take that back.
To champion our conservative principles.
We are the party of law and order.
To call in the auditors.
We haven't yet decided whether we're going to call for the government to impose a mandatory test or vaccination.
And we will win the next election. Canada must not ignore the reality of climate change.
Why weren't Canadians vaccinated in January and February like everyone else?
Welcome, everybody, to Controlled Opposition. I'm Greg Wycliffe. This is episode 17, and joining me tonight is a patriot, the grizzly patriot who takes the slings and arrows, who actually does fight the woke, is the founder and CEO of Forum for Canadian Sovereignty, which is Canada's only NGO opposed to the UN Agenda 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Friesen, how are you doing this evening, sir?
I'm good, Greg. How are you? Good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. I'm doing okay. We were, before we turned the camera on here, we were talking about how there's just so many criticisms, there's so many angles to attack these fake conservatives. That's like, where do you even begin? But I thought, of course, we're going to be talking about them trying to cancel Mother's Day. We're going to be talking about the pro-life protest, massive pro-life protest that happened in Ottawa, and of course how the parliamentary police were picking on Josh Alexander once again. But let's start with these wildlife fires, because you're out west there in Saskatchewan. I want to hear kind of what your experience was of hearing about these fires, and then of course the consequential local bureaucracy preventing citizens from even trying to defend their property, which is totally just kooky Canadian stuff, right?
So I think it's important that we add a little context to these fires. Now, I don't have the smoking gun evidence to suggest that these fires are happening because of what they're spraying in our skies. I don't have that evidence, but I can connect the dots, and it leads into this whole idea that they want people off rural property and they want to force people into the cities.
Right.
And so is this something that was coordinated? I believe it is. I believe it's coordinated. I believe, when you have over 100 fires in, the end of April into the beginning of May, when everything should still be wet, because the snow just melted fairly recently. That's, to me, there's something more to this. There's something else going on. And then when you throw in, bylaws that are being enforced, preventing landowners from saving their own property by cutting, fire blocks. They can't do that. They can't haul water. They can't, access these areas to put out the fires because the police are stopping them. There's much more at play here than first meets the eye.
Yeah, and there was some images that people were sharing around that made it look like people were lighting some of these fires.
Yeah.
And that should certainly be looked into, right? Like that should certainly be a massive, massive, massive concern for anyone who claims to care about the environment.
Well, there was a guy that was charged with 10 counts of arson, who was starting a lot of these fires. So, and he's not alone. Other people have witnessed people lighting these fires. And it seems to me, when the Notleys of the world and the Trudeaus of the world want to set a narrative that climate change is what's causing these fires, then you have little shit rats running around the countryside lighting fires to bolster the narrative and the perception that they're putting forward that somehow this is because of climate change. And it's not a stretch to then think that these little commies are running around lighting fires to bolster this narrative. It's not a stretch at all.
Yeah, and here's an example. Cold Lake area man facing 10 arson charges after a string of wildfires. Police arrested and charged John Cook is his name. Isn't that poetic? But yeah, and I mean it's too bad. Like, I would love, at me on Twitter. Is there a clip of any conservative politician drawing attention to this? Because this is an act of terrorism in a way. Like, this is an act of intentionally destroying the environment. And the only thing we're seeing people talk about it in the House of Commons is Stephen Guilbeault saying, "Hey, this is climate change, guys." And It's like, are we going to talk about the fact, or Stephen, maybe that was your friend who lit the fire. Is that what it was? Is that what's going on here? Just kidding, of course.
Well, so I made I connected some of the dots a while ago and suggested that possibly these people were being paid by, Notley operatives, by Trudeau Guilbeault operatives. Who knows? I don't know. I don't have the smoking gun. But it's not a stretch to think that these people will commit domestic terrorism, again, to bolster this narrative that climate change is creating these fires, which is, complete hogwash.
Of course. Hey, I got a super chat from Sir Alexander Full. Can you buy a coffee in Canada for my donation? $2.20. I don't know. Yeah, no, of course. Thank you, Sir Alexander Full. I'll get a extra large single cream for me is my order. But let's get into, because you sent me this message, and there's a lot of accounts like this, but let's just look at this one because it kind of goes right into what we're talking about. So this is in regards to, well, you'll understand the context in a minute. Actually, could you maybe explain where this message came from?
So this came from a guy who lives in Alberta. He's one of my followers on Twitter, and he posted this. And I thought it was really important that people see this and get exposed to what's happening, based on the perspective of the people that live in Alberta.
Yeah, exactly. So, who the hell are making up all these rules? I'm trying to get a tote of water out to Buck Creek to put out hotspots, and these morons looking after the roadblocks tell me I need a permit to go 1 block to Co-op to get fuel. I'm so sick is these guys that don't have a clue. Wednesday, when this all started, I had 5 tank truckloads of water from Nelson Bros and HVO come out to Buck Creek. Fire was across road from my daughter's place, raging out of control, and they wouldn't use any of the water sent them home loaded. To beat that, Thursday morning, I go out and talk to an RCMP to get us more water out. He tells me to mind my business, that they had it out and people are able to come home. Well, I told him he was wrong, and 45 minutes later, it was out of control and started burning out of control again. Couldn't listen and wouldn't let Hayduke use their water cannon or cats. Thank God Greg Hayduke come with 2 or 3 cats. Gary, sorry, I'm like a city like fragile fairy. What's a cat?
That would be a Caterpillar,
Okay.
a front end loader.
Like a massive trailer.
Yeah. Well, a big tractor.
Sorry, tractor.
A loader.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gary Nelson showed up with water truck. They told him to go home again. And this is why it come across the river and took over town. We lost home and people are evacuated, all because no one has a clue, or do they not care who loses their home? And if it wasn't for my son-in-law, Layden Cox, working as hard as he can, a lot more people would be homeless. Layden is a hero in my mind. He has held it back at his place. He had a lot of help from volunteers, Nelson Bros, Mojo, Fire Department. Hodgson had cats all night, Thursday and Friday. LCC was there. You know what LCC is?
No.
They're all heroes, picked to follow. The roadblock guys are just completely insane. Won't let anyone help. He saved it because all of these guys mentioned. Hopefully I didn't miss anyone that helped. So thank you to big thanks to D&D Tank Truck for supplying 2 tank truck for water hauling to Gary Stone and Landon Cox. So, and this is not the only example of this. I was sharing a clip earlier of this like town hall. And these people, you had a stage full of these suits, a stage full of these, bureaucrats or whatever authority they might have. Someone was pointing out the fact that they make like over $100K a year probably. And there's people in the crowd being like, what were you guys doing? It was us, the citizens, who are basically going against your so-called rules to save our own ass, to save our own property.
Right. And I love that clip, by the way, because that sort of thing needs to happen on a much more frequent and regular basis, where the people are demanding answers and accountability from our politicians who are sitting on their thumbs watching people's homes, livelihoods being decimated by fires while they do nothing. And they block the roads of the people that actually want to do something to help. It's so incredibly frustrating. But again, all of this leads into the much bigger picture where, rural folks are left behind. Rural folks, the bureaucracy doesn't care because they want rural folks to move into the cities. Rural folks are the worst case scenario for globalists and this hyper centralization, because rural folks have the values of self-reliance, self-determination, independence, and community. And they can deal with anything Mother Nature throws at us. We can deal with anything that anybody throws at us in these communities, in rural Saskatchewan, rural Alberta. We can handle it. That terrifies them because those are the people that are the targets in all of this.
Yeah, because you guys have agency.
Yes.
You have agency. You have the machinery. You have the tools. You are able to survive on the land without without Uber Eats.
We can be independent. We don't need government handouts. We don't need to rely on government to survive. And this has been, a hallmark of rural, Canada for decades, for a long time, and this is why they're the targets. This is why Saskatchewan, Alberta is such a target, because there's a lot of conservative-minded folks in rural Saskatchewan, rural Alberta, rural Manitoba, even into rural BC, and so we're a target. There's no question about it. And they have to defeat us if they're going to grab the rest of this country. They have to go through us to get it.
Right.
And so that's why I continually promote this idea that we need to be strong in the face of this. And we need to elect political parties and leaders that are strong and will say no to Ottawa and say no to all of this insanity.
Absolutely. And it's not even so much that, they're going after the conservatives on the countryside. It's they're attacking the culture of self-reliance that rural people have. You know, that's
Yes.
that's the real problem. It's not even
Yes.
so much about the, oh, you believe in the two different genders. In this case, it's more of the, oh, these people know how to take care of themselves on the land. They don't need to go to the city. They don't need to rely on daddy government. And they know how to cultivate the land. And
Yes.
and
And
that
produce
is
food for themselves,
right.
and to harvest food for themselves, and to look after themselves, and to stay safe in, you know, whatever the situation is. We're able to do that. And you know, the funny thing is, Greg, is most of humanity used to be like this.
Yeah.
But it's just up until, you know, relatively recently that people have become spoiled, and they look to government to take after them, to look after all of their precious needs, where that was never the case, even in this country 100 years ago. Just imagine what our ancestors did when they plopped down here from wherever they came, and they were toiling the land and living in these harsh conditions, and what they went through to build and create what they gave to us that we're handing over to the government. It makes me physically ill to consider that.
Yeah, we've been smothered by technology and convenience, and slowly but surely the culture has just completely decayed into this weird kind of globalist culture where it's just like, you know what, everything's taken care of. You know, all you need to worry about now is, you know, what color other people's skin is, and your genitals, and like, can we be more welcoming to immigrants, and like the history and what cultivated this land. None of that's important. But I did want to highlight a comment here. Jason73 in chat says, this is how the BC wildfires go too. They turn away equipment and operators because they have wildfire service knobheads who don't know their arse from a hole in the ground. And yeah, there was somebody else on Twitter who reached out basically with a video saying the same thing of like, hey, I've worked in wildfire services for several years, and this is actually nothing new. And of course, the $1 million question here on Controlled Opposition is there any conservative MP? Is there any conservative politician who is drawing attention to this? You know, the strong, hey, I'm a conservative, I'm free. You know, they dominate Alberta, right there. That's all conservative MPs basically across Alberta. Are they talking about this right to defend your own land? Like, so fundamental.
They're pathetic. They have no backbone, because within the establishment parties, these MPs are sheep within their party. Mm-hmm. They won't step outside the lines that have been drawn by party brass. They won't do it because, they might lose that paycheck and that pension that they've, you know, just spent years accruing. So it's you know, they're not going to step outside the lines, whether they're conservative, liberal, NDP. It doesn't matter. They're all the same. None of them will speak outside of, you know, the lines that have been drawn within their parties. They just won't.
Yeah, and what needs to be emphasized here too is because so often you've encountered this a lot, Mr. Friesen. So often there'll be these conservative party supporters who are like, no, but the conservatives are better though, and they're a better option though, and he's not as bad as Trudeau though. And it's like, guys, in this instance, this is some of the very, very worst globalist policies you could even imagine. Okay? Like the local bureaucracy saying, no, you can't defend your own property. That's not even your property anymore because emergency. Oh, because emergency. And like, let's face it, that was a thing that was used to take your rights away over the past 3 years during the pandemic. It was an emergency, right? All they need to do is pay some Antifa guy to light a fire in like, you know, in an adjacent municipality. And then all of a sudden you're not even allowed to go home because of the bureaucracy. This conservative government is not opposing this, so they must support it. It's the worst of the worst kind of globalist policies where they're basically saying, you own nothing. We own it now because we're calling it an emergency.
And this sort of leads into, you know, some of these rural municipalities and these bylaw changes, land use bylaw changes that they're they're coming in with. So it's interesting to watch how they present this. In Alberta, we had Thorhild, where they came in with a sledgehammer of changes, where they're talking about animal units per acre that you're allowed to have. And so they did it there in Thorhild, and the people stood up and said, absolutely not, we're not taking this. And then they went to Wainwright and they imposed similar changes to bylaws and land use bylaws. But in Saskatchewan, it's kind of interesting to watch how they do this. I went to a rural municipality meeting between 3 rural municipalities in Melfort, Saskatchewan, and that's pretty rural. And there was a consulting firm that was hired with money from the provincial government to hire this consulting firm from Saskatoon, who's been hired as a community planner to plan the rural municipalities in these 3 rural municipalities that surround Melfort. And the first question that I had was, why are you hiring anybody outside this community? Only you folks know how to plan this rural municipality.
Because you live here.
Only you folks use this land. Only you folks know the issues that you need to tackle, not some consulting firm who's been trained in sustainable development agenda, who are going to ram this down your throat if you say yes to this proposal. And so there was one rural municipality fella, I won't mention his name, but he absolutely refused to accept this proposal as it was presented, because he says, I don't know anything about this. I'm not saying yes to something I don't know anything about. Forget it. Get it off my desk. I'm not signing it. And that's exactly how this has to be handled. And it has to be given and presented to the people that live and work in these rural municipalities. And so it's coming. And people have to be really hyper aware of what they're trying to do. So this proposal that they brought forward, that they were trying to soft sell to the people of this area, we identified it as sustainable development agenda 100%. All of the language used in the proposal lends itself to this agenda. And so we identified all of the things, and we told the people that were in attendance, absolutely say no to any of this garbage. And of course, this consulting firm, these talking heads, were walking around trying to interfere with what we were doing, because we were warning the people not to accept this proposal, this dramatic change, because they're setting the table for what is yet to come down the road. So it wasn't this sledgehammer that they're hitting the people with. It's this drip incrementalism. And this is what they're setting the stage for. So again, anytime there's outside consultants coming in to plan your rural municipality, kick them out. Kick them out. Don't give them any of your money. Use that money and put together a committee of the people in your rural municipalities and plan your rural municipality. Do it yourself.
It's like the devil showing up with the briefcase, and and these days in 2023, the devil shows up as a gay woman with thick brimmed glasses. No, maybe I shouldn't go there. But
right.
But I'm noticing the pattern here of the solution. The solution to all of this stuff seems to actually be really simple. Say no. Say
yes.
No. I
Right.
don't want to do that, because
and so the antidote to all of this hyper centralization, global governance, the antidote to all of that is, again, self-reliance, self-determination, independence, and community. That's the antidote to all of this, and the ability to come together and say no, fuck off, stay away from our way of life. We'll decide. Thank you.
Yeah. And, it's it's already there. We know this, you know, people I've called you a conspiracy theorist and everything, but it's like these people that come in like these little devils with their briefcases and their quotas for how many animals per acre and all this. It all comes from the SDGs. It all comes from these certain goals. Like it all tracks back to that. And it's a conspiracy, but it's right in front of us.
It is.
It's right in front of us.
100%.
So let's talk about the Mother's Day stuff. So this is an article from True North. Manitoba school ditches Mother's Day and Father's Day to be, quote, inclusive. Now, I don't know how widespread this is in Canada, but obviously it's definitely disturbing.
So there's actually 2 townships right outside Saskatoon. I was informed today that they are also implementing this policy and ditching Mother's Day and Father's Day in their schools.
Crazy.
It is crazy.
And I mean,
all because there are a few kids in each of these schools that don't refer to their parents as mom and dad because maybe they're not. So we're going to sacrifice all the kids that have mom and dad as their parents. We're going to sacrifice them all just so a couple of these race to the bottom socialism, the weakest of the weak, is pandered to. That's what this is about. It's communism. It's collectivism.
It's about destroying the family unit, you know, destroying what the family is, mother and father. And, you know, it's so weird with all of these kind of globalist policies. It's like, who asked for this? It's right. and it's always, once again, thick brimmed glasses, rainbow flag. It's like these like extreme activists on the far left, right. Who, it's just crazy. But let's see, because I was thinking that Pierre Poilievre wasn't going to say anything about this, but he said something. At least he said something about this. But let's see what he says. The woke wants to delete Mother's Day. This ugly and weird ideology, which Trudeau endorsed at his party convention, wants to delete everything except the state, which would control everything and everyone.
So it's interesting that Pierre comes out with this shortly after Maxime Bernier came out with his statement in regards to this happening in Quebec, in his home province. And so it's always after the fact that Pierre seems to have to, you know, shore up his support from this side.
Yeah. I mean, I just responded with this, which is like, your party is woke too. Right. You know, this is the deputy leader of the Conservative Party, Landsman, transgender, gay, of visibility. Michelle Rempel condemns the people protesting an all ages drag show. Aaron O'Toole, Trans Day of Visibility. Scott Atchison, Trans Day of Visibility. This is as woke as it gets, folks. This is pretty well as woke as it gets. It's completely congruent with canceling Mother's and Father's Day. So it's like, what are you talking about? You endorse the same ideology, bro.
Well, and so again, I want to add some context to this because all of this is in compliance with Agenda 2030 and sustainable development, which one of the priorities of that agenda, as identified by one of its creators, Dennis Meadows, is population reduction. And that's where all of this leads to. I mean, we've been browbeaten over abortion for decades. We're browbeaten over transgenderism and LGBTQ supremacy. Mm-hmm. We're beaten over the head with euthanasia, where we're going to allow kids to decide if they want to end their life because they had a bad day. All of this leads to, and then, of course, the manufacturing of a virus that killed 6 million people, and then the follow-up with the jab that, you know, is killing I don't know how many people. So all of this stuff, and then they want to reduce CO2 in the atmosphere, which is a fundamental building block of all life on Earth. So all of this funnels into this agenda of depopulation. That's what all of this is. And they're playing along.
And it's, I would say, a growing number of conservative Canadians are becoming hip to this. They're becoming wise to this. They're learning about these SDGs, like they're even learning the acronyms, the UN 2030. They're seeing the patterns, because at the end of the day, it's pattern recognition. And the sad part is that despite seeing this, they'll still wait for that little breadcrumb, right? They'll wait for that little breadcrumb from Pierre Poilievre saying, "Oh, actually, I don't go to the World Economic Forum anymore. Actually, I'm not associated with the UN." And they're like, "Whoa, he's totally our guy. He's totally going to save us." Meanwhile, he's not talking about any of these prevailing patterns, these prevailing things that are happening. And this Mother's Day thing is another great example of the bare minimum of saying, "Hey, I disagree with canceling Mother's Day. Wake up, people. Wake up." Okay. Yes. It's the house is on fire.
And you have to ask, like, come on, seriously. You have to ask. On 2 occasions now, myself and Rob Primo have had the opportunity to ask Pierre Poilievre his position on Agenda 2030 and the SDGs. On both occasions, he lied. He's lied to well over 500,000 people who have seen my video, and openly lied because he's actually voted on the SDGs numerous times in favor. And his party is the party that committed us to this agenda in 92 and 2015 and made it law in 2008. So you can't deny their commitment to this agenda and what this agenda represents. You just can't.
Yeah, and on a more sort of like shallow level, we'll say, this is the same behavior that we hate about Trudeau, guys.
Yes.
This is the same behavior, the flagrant lying, the kind of like big-headed, like I am going to do and say whatever I can to get you out of my fucking face because I'm a slimy politician who's just like trying to manipulate you, and I'm just going to feed you the lines and tell you to fuck off. Right.
Well, and it's the classic response. I mean, on 2 occasions, even on Twitter, Jerry Ritz played, "I'm just stupid. I don't understand any of this, what your guys are talking about. It sounds like a conspiracy theory to me." And then Tony Clement, just yesterday, he's claiming that what we're piling on with is nonsense. Well, Tony, it's not nonsense. It's reality. It's what you committed to. It exists. It's what's creating all of this insanity that's all around us.
And that's a whole trend that we've been seeing recently since, as this kind of this weird political climate we're in escalates, where it's like, that's a conspiracy theory. Well, it's actually a good thing, and it's totally happening. Like such a weird time that we find ourselves in. But let's talk about, I know you got to go shortly, but let's talk about some pro-life stuff. There was a massive protest in Ottawa for a pro-life march. Lots and lots of people.
Very good.
Did you hear about this? And who, when it comes to pro-life versus pro-choice, I mean, once again, the $1 million question: have you heard any conservative MPs trying to fight for that pro-life argument? It's pretty well, they've abandoned it, right? They're not even trying to make that argument.
Well, because I think their focus groups tell them to abandon it, right? Because I think the prevailing narrative throughout this country is that, abortion is healthcare. In this crazy world we live in, abortion is healthcare for women, right? Disregarding the life that they're destroying with a vacuum and some other implements. It's just we've taken this society so far in the wrong direction that we don't even respect human life anymore in this country very much, Greg.
It's true, man. If you look at the numbers of MAID, for example, in Canada, it's horrifying. It's very scary to see how many people are succumbing and saying, "Oh, I'm gonna do the MAID thing." And yeah, I mean, the pro-life, pro-choice thing is it's accepting it to be like a lost battle is totally the wrong move on so many different levels, because, you know, people are saying, oh, the next election will help us save Canada. No. It's not about the next election. There is a huge, you know, spiritual war going on right now. There is moral failings. We are in the middle of, like, you know, a test of who we are as a nation. And we need Canadians who are going to tell the truth and do the right thing more than ever. And
what's really cool, and I've seen this happen in a lot of different places in rural Saskatchewan and rural Alberta, where those people come out in droves and they're dying for somebody to stand up in front of them and tell them the truth. They're starving for it because they've been lied to for decades by these elected officials. And a lot of that is our responsibility that we have to take back, that we have to re-engage and start holding these politicians accountable for the decisions they're making on our behalf.
Yeah, and it comes down to people like you and me to give these people a voice. The trucker convoy is another great example. It wasn't politicians who was giving rural Canadians or unvaccinated Canadians a voice. Despite their silence, the truckers came out and actually made this huge demonstration that really changed the trajectory of the country. You know, and when it comes to the pro-life, pro-choice argument, I hate to say it, but this protest almost helps the Liberals more than anything, because what's happening the exact same day, like, there is just so much messaging coming out. Hey, I am pro-choice. I'm pro-choice. Like, there's so many things. I'm pro-choice. I'm pro-choice. The Conservative Party is so messed up. I'm pro-choice. Maybe it wasn't that one, but, you know, it's this protest, this pro-life protest happens, and who's given a voice? No conservatives are talking about being pro-life. Like, they're not capitalizing on this moment to be like, yeah, actually pro-life. Look at this huge crowd. This is a popular sentiment in Canada.
But
on the contrary,
Greg, this is the cancer that's spreading throughout our political establishment on all sides. And it's happening federally and it's happening provincially, where nobody has the strength to just say no to these people who have mental illness. Say no. We're pandering to mental illness, and the what's going to come from this, just the transgender movement and the confusion it's going to create in our youth and in our children, is going to explode into the insane high number of suicide rates, you know, when they're teenagers and young adults, because they don't know who they are. And we're pandering to this. There has to be politicians that people will support that are strong enough to say no to all of it. We have to go back to a time when we respected human life, and we're moving away from that. And that's scary to me.
And we really are so far away from it, because it's not even about, you know, championing life. It's there aren't even people who are comfortable saying, hey, I'm pro-life. Like, there's like that, you know what I mean? Like people are afraid to even say, hey, I think that killing an unborn baby is wrong. Like, people are afraid to even say that. And it's like, guys, we shouldn't be afraid. Like, our nice Canadian character needs to change, because it's gotten to the point where it's like, well, I feel this way, but I don't want to say it. And it's like, it should be totally fine to say it. You should be 100%. Okay saying that and having that feeling of, you know, disagreeing with this, you know, globalist, liberal, woke ideology that is like holding the country hostage. Okay.
100%.
And obviously I do think the right approach is to not just say, hey, I think it's okay. Like what I just said, to like, hey, I think it's okay to just say that it's okay to say this. We should be going that further step and saying, no, I am pro-life and like you guys are wrong. Like you
call
need
me
to push.
whatever you want to call me. I don't care. This is me. These are my values. This is my integrity and my morality. I don't care what you call me.
Absolutely. Crushed it. You said you had to go out this time. Did you want to go over one quick thing for a few minutes? Or
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
So obviously we're going to bring up, this happened on Parliament Hill. Was this today? I think this was actually today. But essentially this is Josh Alexander getting kicked off of Parliament Hill once again. Apparently he had like a trespassing thing for it. But this is somebody this young man is taking the slings and the arrows. This man is saying, hey, I am pro-life and this is what I stand for. And you have a bunch of grown adults who are parliamentary security bullying him around. It's so shameful. And it's such a perfect opportunity for a real conservative politician to say, hey, I stand with this young man. You know, it would be, we've talked about this so many times on the show where it's like, if a conservative MP were to actually do something, not even that bold, something smart, he would be rewarded for it. People would go crazy.
There are endless opportunities, Greg, in this day and age for a conservative to step up and defend the values they claim to cherish, but yet they never do.
And we're told that this is part of the strategy, Mark. This is part of the strategy of them to beat Trudeau.
Yeah. They'll be different once they're elected.
Yeah, and it's really, really crushing and terrifying too, because not only is, the Conservative Party not standing up for people like Josh Alexander who are taking the slings and the arrows, but it's getting even worse. I don't know if you heard about this, but Josh recently disclosed that his parents are facing consequences, presumably because they're just the parents of this young man who said, hey, bro, I think there's only two genders. Like I'm against the woke. I'm Pierre Poilievre. I'm against the woke. You're not going to talk about this. You're not going to stand up for this young man and his family being picked on for this.
Pierre will just keep things on the surface. He's not going to go anywhere below the surface because of perception.
Absolutely disgusting.
It is disgusting.
But and I guess also to kind of like drive the point home, I'll play this quick clip. It's only like 17 seconds, but like it's a very easy low hanging fruit to make Trudeau look like an idiot, which is something that Pierre loves to do.
So let me be very clear. This government will never tell a woman what to do with her body.
Yeah.
If anyone who doesn't have a
but get vaccinated
medical reason for not getting fully vaccinated chooses to not get vaccinated, there will be consequences.
There will be consequences. Yeah. So it's like, don't you love to point out the hypocrisy of Justin Trudeau, Pierre Poilievre? You're not even going to do that. Like it's such a low hanging fruit, and he's still not going to do it because it goes against these globalist policies.
100%. Absolutely.
Got a couple super chats here from Kura Christine. Many single parents will miss out on mom, dad, day gifts from their kids if they cancel it. Where's the empathy for that? That's right. What about the Mother's Day gifts? What about the Father's Day gifts?
Gone. They don't matter. They don't matter anymore.
Well, I mean, what about Hallmark? Hallmark's stock is going to plummet when they can't sell their Mother's Day cards.
What about the macaroni necklace? Right. That's a staple of grade 2 Mother's Day, Father's Day stuff. The macaroni necklace.
I never got to do the macaroni necklace.
Wow.
I was deprived.
Oh, that's sad. That's sad.
Yeah, that's sad. We got to mandate that once we get into power. And speaking of us getting into power, we got to talk about this because we want to give people solutions here, right? People are always upset. Oh, well, we have to get Trudeau out. We have to get Trudeau out. Well, here's an opportunity to actually get a real dissident opposition voice in, which is People's Party leader Maxime Bernier is likely to announce his candidacy in the Manitoba by-election. So there's a by-election essentially that's happening later this year. And the exciting thing is, this might take me a second, but I'll bring up the numbers. This is a really, really good riding for PPC to actually win. A lot of people like to say, oh, they're going to split the vote. They're going to split the vote. And that's actually not really something that's going to happen in this riding.
No. They could split it 50-50 and it wouldn't matter.
That's right. Because in the last election, there was, here we go. In the last election, you can see the numbers right here. This was pretty well a paper candidate, if I'm not mistaken, Solomon Wiebe, and he got 22% of the vote almost for a People's Party. This is the riding that Maxime Bernier is going to be running in this by-election, Portage Lisgar. And I think that, it's time for people to shut up and support Max. Like, even if you're not...
Yes.
Even if you're not in this riding, like, this is an exciting opportunity to actually disrupt the House of Commons and to actually get a conservative voice in the House of Commons. There is no vote splitting. So even if you're like some conservative party who wants to get Trudeau out, you should still want to support Max in this instant if you want the Conservative Party to be more conservative.
Right.
Which most conservatives
100%.
want.
And,
right?
and just as a disclaimer, I'm not related to the New Democrat Ken Friesen.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. I didn't even notice that.
Just in case anybody out there noticed that, I'm not related at all.
Sorry, Ken. But
No,
well, I know you got to go. So thank you so much for your time.
Man.
Today on the show. Anything else you wanted to add in regards to what we talked about, where people can find you?
Yeah, I mean, the world is very crazy right now, and it's hard to find hope, but I'm still relatively hopeful because I believe in humanity, and I believe that there will be a tipping point at some point in the relatively near future that turns this thing around. I'm would I bet the farm on it? Not sure, but I'm hopeful, and I think we're moving in the right direction. There's enough of us that are influencing enough other people that at some point there is going to be that tipping point, and so if you want to find me, you can find me on my website ffcs.info. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Rumble. I'm not really using YouTube anymore. I'm pretty tired of that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show. There is a link to Mark Friesen's Twitter in the description, along with ffcs.info, Forum for Canadian Sovereignty. Thank you for the super chat, Silverman and Buddy. Thank you so much for that.
Always a great conversation, Greg. Much appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. I think there is going to be a tipping point. Chris Sky is running for mayor, which I'm really excited about. I think he's going to disrupt the conversation. I think he can actually win. And Max Bernier with his by-election. This could be part of the tipping point. And we already saw that the real character of Canada is there with the trucker convoy. So we got to keep pushing, and we got to do the right thing. And as we say on the show, it is okay to demand higher standards.
Yes, it's okay to say no.
It's okay to say no as well. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Bye.